Hello Zen fam, look, had a shave. Right, so there's been a lot of talk recently in the community, and people are saying, oh, that voice actress that played Abby in The Last of Us Part 2, she wants to do more work. And some people going, yay! And some people going, no! And we should probably discuss that, shouldn't we? Yes. So, The Last of Us Part 2. I personally enjoyed it a lot. I enjoyed it as much, in fact, in some ways, more than the first part. Now, the first part was probably a little bit more hard-hitting in some areas, and the second part was some hard-hitting in other areas. But the story is what's important when it comes to a game like The Last of Us, or a series like The Last of Us. The story is king. And quite frankly, I think both games told a fantastic story. Now, the character motivations are what's often brought into question when talking about the Last of Us series. And that's fair, and these are things that obviously have to be discussed, because it is fair to say that the main characters from both sides of the story divide. I'm trying not to spoil for anybody that's yet to play The Last of Us Part 2, even The Last of Us. Okay, so I'm being a bit careful here, guys, because, fair's fair. I've been spoiled, and it sucks when you get spoiled. So, there are character motivations for both sets of characters from both sides of the story that, when you break them down as individual stories and individual character ideas, make sense to that character and their life. But when the two collide, that's where the trouble starts. But then that's how life is. When humans interact with each other, they have different motivations, they have different psyches, they have different, motivational positions that make them interact differently with every other human they come across. And this situation is obviously amplified within the context of a post-apocalyptic world, where the struggle for survival is most certainly a thing. And the two characters, in some ways, are more alike than they'd actually like to admit. They both don't give up. They both lost the father figure. They both need validation. They both have this searing pit of revenge inside their soul. And, both games are wonderfully written. And the environments, of course, are just mwah. I mean, you look at the environment to The Last of Us 2, with the prone settings, the sneaking through the foliage, the hiding under trucks, the using, random items placed in the world to fight back with. I mean, The Last of Us 2 is a brilliant game. I mean, when you're sneaking around enemies in areas, and you take one of them out and they're calling out for their mate, or you take out the dog and they're like, my dog. It's like, Naughty Dog did a wonderful, wonderful job thus far with The Last of Us series. Now, yes, The Last of Us 2 still doesn't have an online competitive mode, for which some people in The Last of Us fandom is a problem. A lot of people love that online competitive mode. My mate Silver Sky 454, I know he loved that competitive mode back in the PS3, or was it PS4? I think it was the PS3 version of Last of Us. He absolutely adored it. He used to just kill fools everywhere. Guy was awesome at the game. And it still hasn't materialised for 2. And I'm beginning to wonder if it ever will. So there's a possibility that, since she's saying she's up for more work, that maybe they'll be in sort of, not so much an online competitive mode, but maybe a side story with Abby. and her wee pal, who I'm not going to name because spoilers. I know his name, I'm just saying it. It begins with an L, alright? That's as far as I'm going. Just so you know that I'm not talking at my bum. Alright? So, maybe a wee sort of side story with them two, you know, maybe 2-3 years down the line, you know, after the effect of the main story, you know? And maybe that'll have, like, maybe that could be a 2-player online cooperative, you know, a lot of like some of the 2-player games we've seen over the last wee while, you know, the last couple of years, like that one with the 2 guys that break out of prison and they'll have to work together. You know, and you play with somebody online. Or you just set it up to the other person being CPU controlled, because you can't always find your pals online, because let's face it, most of the people that buy The Last of Us are the mature audience, and those of us in the mature audience, I hate to break it to you game developers, but we have jobs. Okay? We have jobs. I have a job, I have a family, and I have this YouTube channel. So my time for gaming is limited. And I'm not going to spend, you know, upwards of 10 to 30 minutes waiting in a lobby to get somebody to come play with me. Much as fun as that is, don't get me wrong. So, the idea of a small, you know, sort of side game, much like in the mold here of maybe Miles Morales behind me, you know? It's sort of like a smaller, tighter game. Not as much money, obviously, because it's a smaller thing. You know, with that 2-player co-op style, you know, tacked on, could be interesting. But a full TLOU free, that's a different beastie altogether. I would actually think that for The Last of Us Part 3, we change it up completely. We follow one of the characters that we've met before and introduce them with other new characters that are brought in along the way as the story is told. I think we've seen enough of Ellie to last us. Ellie's story is told. I think anything more than that would be gilding the lily. I think Abby's story, aside from maybe that little game that I spoke of a couple of moments ago, I think her story is basically told as for her wee pal. So, what else do we do? Do we go back to the group that Abby came from and tell a story from one of those people? You know, maybe even the leader of her group, how he brought all the people together after the virus and stuff, and you know how they built that community. You could even add in building mechanics, you know, sort of like actively build the base, a bit kind of like Dead Nation, I think it is. The one with the zombies and you go around the town and you rank up the houses and you try and build the base better. I can't remember, but I remember Wingy playing it. Anyway, there's any number of directions they could go, but I definitely think you move away from Abby, you move away from Ellie, definitely. You could stay within one of the other 2 community bases that were brought about from the first 2 games, you know? Or you could do something completely new. I personally would favour something completely new, because Naughty Dog is at its best when it does completely new. I mean, whenever they start something up and they just really go for it with a completely fresh slate, then that would be awesome. Maybe even set it about another 20 years on, you know? It's sort of like more mutations to the clickers and stuff, and you know, resources are kind of changing, the world is being different, you know, the buildings that were around are even more destroyed, more crumbled. There's greater levels of agriculture. You have to look after the town as well as look after yourself. And maybe there's sort of a deeper structure in missions and a deeper structure in character development, and how does humanity move on, you know? At that stage, maybe we've reached a point where there are being other people who have turned up who have an immunity to it, and maybe we can actually find a way finally to break the immunity and then get out and, you know, start disseminating a cure amongst all the little communities dotted around. Maybe traveling from community to community, delivering the cure. Yeah, and slowly but surely, it could be quite a long game where you build humanity back up, and maybe you take jumps in 5-year portions as humanity comes back and the infected more and more recede. Anything could be done, anything. But the question is, will it actually happen? And my personal feeling is I don't actually believe there'll be a TLOU 3. I really don't. I think the team at Naughty Dog are really happy with what they had, and if I know Naughty Dog the way I think I do, I think they'll do something else completely different. Because, let's face it, Nathan Drake, he's done with. And Naughty Dog like to move on. I mean, how many Naughty Dog franchises can you think that have lasted more than 4 games? Not many. Very few of them last beyond 2 or 3. I mean, obviously, Uncharted is the exception. You could say the same for Sly Cooper. There's many things they could do, but I personally think that Naughty Dog will do something completely new. They might use the actor that voiced Abby, which is no bad thing because that person is very, very talented. But I think at this stage of things as they stand, I don't think there's going to be another at least full TLOU game. And if there is, it's at least 3, maybe even 4 years down the road. Once the PlayStation 5 is understood at a super nice level, and they've been able to push it in every way possible, because let's face it, they have to keep improving the graphical intensity. I mean, yes, they did give it a polish up for PlayStation 5 with that lovely patch, but to really take advantage of the PlayStation 5 power and the fast SSD and all that malarkey, they have to do something really special with the game. Really change the weather effects and the interactivity and the feedback from the world that the characters exist in. Not just like moving leaves and grasses as they push through. I mean, real sort of visceral feel as if you're in the world. Obviously, stuff to do within the DualSense, I mean, like, you can have all kinds of stuff happening. Maybe like some sort of side vibration that you can feel yourself scraping against walls, or moving up against trees to take cover. Who knows? But as I see it right now, I don't think there'll be another The Last of Us game for quite some time, if at all. And if so, more likely than not, a small side game with a small story that has an online component. But that's just my thoughts. Obviously, I'd love yours, so typey down below, let them bloke know. So, that's my thoughts. Hashtag support Scottish YouTubers, and of course, as always, aye, no bother.